Botten, a 40-year-old black man, lived an ordinary life, yet he carried an extraordinary secret. He was a senior agent in a government organization. His work required caution and discretion, qualities Botten upheld flawlessly. That night, after a long, exhausting day, he drove home on a deserted highway. The night was dark. Cold air seeped through the cracked window, and soft melodies from the radio soothed his tense mind. His sleek car glided silently along the road, carrying with it the faint aroma of coffee from a paper cup he had hastily sipped earlier. For Botten, this was a rare moment to relax, to enjoy a sliver of peace after an exhausting day. But life has a way of ruining such moments. From a distance, red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror, accompanied by the shrill wail of a police siren. Botten sighed, realizing his ordinary night was about to spiral into an unnecessary ordeal. Calmly, he turned on his signal, pulled over, and reached for his documents in the glove compartment. Aware of the law and its procedures, Botten knew better than to give the officers any excuse to escalate the situation. Still, deep down, he sensed this was no routine traffic stop. This was merely the beginning of a long, tumultuous night where justice and his patience would be pushed to their limits. Botten pulled his car to the side of the road, a weight of unease settling over him. The police cruiser stopped just behind, its flashing lights casting an ominous glow, like the entire world was staring at him through the rearview mirror. He was no stranger to suspicious stares, but tonight, the sense of dread burrowed deeper. Two figures emerged from the cruiser, walking slowly, exuding an air of hostility. Their movements dripped with self-importance, as if they were preparing for a theatrical display of power. The window rolled down, and a cold breeze swept in. The first officer, tall and wiry with an overcompensating mustache, leaned down to meet Botten's eye level. "License and registration, sir," he barked, emphasizing "sir" with a mocking tone. Botten kept his composure, handing over the document silently, his steady gaze unwavering. The second officer, shorter and bald, scanned the car's interior with the exaggerated curiosity of someone hunting for contraband. "Nice car," he muttered with thinly veiled sarcasm. "Not everyone can afford a ride like this. Especially someone like you." Botten swallowed the surge of anger rising within him. He knew better than to react emotionally. It would only feed their arrogance. "Is there a reason I'm being stopped, officers?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with an unmistakable undertone of defiance. "Asking too many questions now, are we?" the wiry officer sneered. "Step out of the car. We need to take a closer look." No explanation, just a blunt command. Botten hesitated, momentarily locking eyes with them. Their disdain was palpable, as though they wanted to strip him of dignity and reduce him to something insignificant. But he refused to give them that satisfaction. He opened the door and stepped out with a steady, composed demeanor that caught the officers off guard, even if just for a second. "Hands on the hood!" the bald officer snapped. Botten complied, and the officer wasted no time wrenching his arms behind him, locking cold handcuffs around his wrists. The metal bit into his skin, the physical discomfort a harsh reminder of the humiliation they intended to impose. "Search the car," the wiry one ordered, and the two began rifling through Botten's belongings with reckless disregard. A coffee cup tumbled to the ground, leaving a dark stain on the pavement, an emblem of their indifference to anything they touched. "Got any weapons or drugs in the car?" the bald officer asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "No," Botten replied curtly. "You know, people like you tend to forget things like that," the officer sneered. The words cut deep, but Botten held his ground, his silence defiant. This wasn't just personal humiliation. It was a battle against a system rife with prejudice, where disdain hid behind a badge. And Botten knew this was only the beginning. Botten entered the police station, not as a free man, but as someone paraded in like a dangerous criminal. The cuffs on his wrists were cold and unforgiving, each step down the dim hallway echoing his growing anger. Behind him, the officers, Taylor and Johnson, smirked, exchanging smug remarks as if they had just achieved some great triumph. The air in the station was stale, a mix of burnt coffee and old paper, but to Botten it was nothing compared to the weight of indignity pressing on his chest. Taylor shoved him toward the booking desk, where a tired-looking clerk barely glanced up. "Name?" she asked flatly. "Botten," he replied calmly, his eyes unwavering. Before he could say more, Johnson chimed in with a smirk. "Botten? That's a big name for someone who probably isn't that important." He chuckled, his mockery cutting through the tense silence. The clerk handed Botten a clipboard. "Fill this out," she said curtly. He raised his cuffed hands in a silent gesture. She sighed, gesturing for Johnson to uncuff him. The moment his hands were freed, Taylor leaned in, his face uncomfortably close. "Tell me, Botten, a guy like you driving a car like that win the lottery, or something less clean?" The insinuation was sharp, but Botten held his tongue, his silence speaking volumes. He filled out the form and was immediately cuffed again, this time tighter, the metal biting into his wrists as they led him to a grimy holding cell. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sterile glow on the cold steel bars. The smell of sweat and despair filled the room. Botten sat in the corner, his mind racing. He knew this was far from over. They wanted to break him, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, he let his determination grow. They'll pay for this, he thought, and justice will prevail. By morning, sunlight streamed through the barred windows, pulling Botten from a restless haze of thoughts. Taylor and Johnson arrived, their smugness still intact, though Botten detected a flicker of unease. "Time to shine, Mr. Botten," Taylor sneered, jangling the keys as they prepared to escort him to court. The courtroom buzzed with quiet intensity as Botten sat silently, observing. Taylor and Johnson strutted in, confidence radiating off them like they were untouchable. Taylor began, weaving a narrative that painted Botten as a defiant, suspicious figure. Johnson nodded along, their lies stacking like bricks in a wall they believed would protect them. But when Botten's lawyer presented the truth, the air shifted. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "the defendant is a senior government agent, wrongfully detained without cause." The judge's sharp gaze scanned the documents, her face hardening. Taylor and Johnson squirmed under her scrutiny. "Officers," she said coldly, "were you aware of Mr. Botten's status?" Their stammered denials fell flat. "Ignorance," she snapped, "is no excuse for misconduct." The gavel fell with a resounding crack, and Botten stood, addressing the court with calm authority. "Power doesn't grant the right to oppress. Justice must be impartial and no one is above the law." Taylor and Johnson left the courtroom, their arrogance shattered, their futures uncertain. Botten walked out free, his victory a beacon of hope for those who face injustice. Outside, surrounded by reporters, Botten's voice rang clear. "This isn't just my story, it's a lesson for all of us. Power, unchecked, destroys. But justice, though delayed, always arrives." His words echoed as a rallying cry, a reminder that dignity and truth can overcome even the deepest prejudice.